Hello and welcome. I'm Darren. And as per title, FSR4 and FrameGen. So that's basically it. And that is where I see the new generation of GPUs. And you can kind of take that as you will. Disappointing to some, improvements to others. The way I see it, I think for those people that are probably still on RDNA 2 or probably still on 30 series NVIDIA GPUs, I think that they're going to get a good upgrade at a better price. And if anything, they might have done themselves a favour by skipping RDNA 3 and the 40 series. For me, it's an interesting one. So obviously NVIDIA is launching, and NVIDIA is launching extremely soon. I don't know when benchmarks are. I don't know if benchmarks are tomorrow or the next day. So benchmarks are coming soon, and these benchmarks is something that I've been talking about for a long time. I'm not saying that it's something I like, but it's the way that I saw things going. Things did change a bit with your, let's say, traditional benchmark. I think we noticed it a bit in some of the benchmarks on Tech Power Up and Hardware Unboxed. Probably the first place to start doing it, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to discount the others. I think I think probably Daniel O and I mean they all might do. I don't watch a lot of it. I know Hardware Unboxed they certainly started to put up graphs of upscalers and FrameGen. And unfortunately, whether we like it or whether we don't like it, this is now, I've said it for quite a long time, this is now the information that we need in a benchmark. The days of raster are dead, unfortunately. Well, they certainly are for now. And whether we like it or not, we're just going to have to live with it. So we are into the era of upscalers and frame generation, and for NVIDIA this generation, FrameGen is the big one. I didn't expect it. I didn't see it coming. I kind of expected everything to just move up through the stack. So, I'm on the 4080 this generation. I expected that to kind of move up to 4090 territory. 4090 obviously take the bump and everything kind of move up the stack. I don't think they're going to quite make that. We won't know until obviously these benchmarks come out, but at the moment I'm kind of getting the feeling that the 5080 is still going to be below the 4090 in raster power, which is kind of a little bit of disappointment. Obviously the 16 gigabytes of VRAM as well. The price, I don't know what do I say? The price is good. The price isn't good. The price is, it's better than expected, maybe. Does that make it good? Not really. But it kind of is what it is, again, which is probably something you're going to hear me saying quite a lot going into the future. It is what it is. So multi-frame gen, I was quite surprised by that. I think everyone was surprised by that. I actually think AMD was surprised by that. That's my gut feeling. But this is where things become very awkward. Now, I watched a couple of the unboxings of the 5090s, so obviously, all your major channels have got their 5090s now. Packaging, a little bit of a disappointment. I understand it, again, but I have to admit, the Founders Editions cards for the 40 series, I know this sounds stupid, and it's just a box. I get that. But that had the most premium packaging I think I've had of a product. That's all I can say. The actual unboxing experience of a 40 series Founders card was actually really good, and it did make you feel probably a little bit better about what you were buying, because the Founders Editions cards are actually really good quality. They are nice looking cards. Some of you might not like the style, I get that, but when it actually comes to the unboxing experience and the actual GPU itself with the build quality, the Founders Editions cards are very, very nice. They're not always the quietest. I will be interested. People have said that the 5090 is quiet. I heard them say that about the 30 series Founders cards, and I can assure you the 30 series Founders cards were not quiet. And to be fair, I probably wouldn't have bought a 4090 Founders. A 4080 Founders without having the 4090 size cooler, I maybe would have, but I probably 600 watts in a Founders cooler. We'll find out. It's a nice looking GPU. I can kind of see the engineering going into it, so why it might work cooling it, with obviously the PCB being down the middle, but who knows. But before we go off on one, frame generation. So I watched the unboxing on Hardware Unboxed, and I believe they talked about the benchmarks, saying that they would be putting up, obviously as soon as they could, their first round of benchmarks. They were obviously getting benchmarks ready, probably redoing some of the GPUs through their test suite of games. They probably changed a few of their games around and all the rest of it, blah, 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 blah. And I don't think I've ever written a comment on the Hardware Unboxed, but this was the first time that I've actually I've written a comment, and it wasn't something, it was just a fleeting comment, not something that, I would expect anyone to change. But as far as it goes, your typical general raster performance benchmark, I actually don't think is anything. I'm not saying it's not something that people don't want, but I don't think it's the important benchmark. I don't think, and to be fair, I don't think it's even about a benchmark. For me, certainly for my needs, if I was thinking about upgrading from the 40 series to the 50 series, the most important information that I need is the multi-frame generation performance. Does it look good? Does it perform well? And that is the information that I need for me to say, okay, sure, I'm going to quick try and buy one, because they will be going quick. And if that's the information that you need, you might be at a point where those GPUs have gone out of stock before that part of the information comes to you, which could be, a little bit unfortunate. I do believe, I think that they'll obviously mention it, at least mention it. And I think I just saw a post on Daniel Owen's community thing saying that he will be doing a pretty decent mention, I hope, about the frame generation, because that's it to me. I don't think that there's going to be a huge raster performance increase. There is obviously talk from NVIDIA about the multi-frame generation going down to the 40 series. I think they're even talking about down to the 30 series. Somehow making it work on that. That doesn't really make sense to me, because frame generation didn't work on 30 series, but obviously maybe it's going through a different pipeline. I'm not sure. I might have read the room wrong. I think it definitely said 40 series. They might be trying to get it to go backwards to the 40 series. So for me personally, I'm not looking to go out and buy one, and I'm going to go through a couple of my reasons why I won't be looking to go out and buy one. And it's not because I have a huge kind of issue with frame generation. I don't. I do use frame generation in a few games, and admittedly, the more I thought about today, the more I actually use it more than what I thought I did. And I do actually use it with mouse and keyboard, surprisingly, and it's not bad. In the games that I use it, I actually prefer to use it prefer to use it rather than not use it. So I don't have a problem with frame generation. I've been very open on using upscalers because I game at 4K. And this is the first reason why I won't be looking to upgrade from the 4080 to the 5080. And it's very simple. At this moment in time, I'm gaming on a 144 Hz monitor. And when I look at the frame generation, I honestly feel the reason that they've gone for this 3 times, 4 times, whatever it is, I think that they've decided the best way that this works is for the most amount of frames that you can push it to. So I actually think this is going to work at its best when you are pushing a 240 hertz monitor. I've seen the graphs they've put up, I've seen the tables they've put up. All of it kind of points me towards it works best the further you can push it, the higher amount of FPS you can get. And unfortunately, I've got a 144 hertz monitor. I don't have the 4K 240 hertz monitors. And to be fair, it's probably a reason why NVIDIA have decided to do this, because we do have monitors getting launched which are 240 hertz 4K monitors. And when you actually think, what the hell are people going to be playing that is going to push a 240 hertz 4K monitor? Because unless you're playing a pretty old game, or you're playing with like a low settings competitive game, something that's made to run obviously like a high FPS, but then I don't think a lot of people will play your kind of competitive shooters that are aimed to run at a high FPS at 4K. So 4K 240 hertz monitor, unless you're playing some old games, you're going to struggle to push 240 hertz. You're going to struggle to push 200. So that puts me in an awkward position, because I'm not about to rush out, spend over £1,000 on a monitor and then £1,000 on a 5080 just so I can test it, just to see how the frame generation works. I'm going to be in it over £2,000. Bit of a shame. I do want to try it. I do want to check it out, because I think the way people test this and the way people talk about this will be the most important factor for people looking at buying these GPUs. I think that's the most important information they can get. Does it look good? Does it perform good? Now, I did remember reading an article. It wasn't PC Gamer, but it was something that sounded very similar to PC Gamer, and it was written by someone that was very skeptical about it. They were at CES. They had the chance to try basically what Jensen had kind of said, which he's been pretty much attacked for. I can understand reasons for, and I can palm it off, because I think anyone that knows anything about that knows it's obvious that a 5070 is never going to perform like a 4090. I get what I can understand what he's getting at. Now, apparently, the person in this article had a chance at CES to play a game. I believe it was the new Marvels, whatever the Marvels shooter game is. They got to play that game, and they got to play it. There was two systems running. One, it was at 4K, so one was on the 4090 at 4K. I believe it was using DLSS quality and running the frame gen, which is what we have now, so 1 times or 2 times, and whatever you want to call it. 2 times, I assume. And then they were running the 5070 with the same settings, so 4K quality upscale. And they were running the 4 times frame generation. Now, he said it was a bit of an outlier. NVIDIA did warn him this, because the 5070 was actually, with the 4 times, producing more. He said it was around 240 FPS, whereas the 4090 was around 190 FPS. They said that's not typical. It just works very well in that game. But your typical, they'd be very close to each other using these settings. But from what he was concerned, he was shocked. He could not tell the difference between the 2 times frame gen running on the 4090 and the 4 times frame gen running on the 5070. And the 5070 with this 4 times frame gen was performing at a higher FPS. Obviously, that doesn't mean that it feels like it's performing at a higher FPS. That's where frame gen is obviously a very grey area. It's very awkward to talk about. Some people get very agitated about it. I understand both sides of the argument. 200 FPS using frame gen will never feel like 200 FPS. But how good it could feel with this new technology NVIDIA are, I will never comment until I actually get a chance to say it myself. So there we go. But to me, that's the biggest thing. So that's it for NVIDIA. I'm just going to have to wait, unfortunately, and I don't know. I'll either wait till it comes to the 40 series that I'm obviously still going to be using, and I'll test it on that, or I don't know, if I somehow fall into some crazy money, which I'm really not expecting to at this moment in time, maybe I'll get to buy a new bloody monitor and a GPU so I can actually test it and give people proper feedback, because I don't think, unless I can actually push it to a high refresh, I don't think I can give proper feedback on it. So there's no point in me doing it. I wouldn't be comfortable doing it, so it would be pointless. AMD. So again, obviously we've seen what AMD is going to be about price. It's going to be big on price, and I believe FSR4 will be the biggest thing. I believe, obviously, I'm around in the internet, I'm around on YouTube, I'm around on Reddit, everywhere, and obviously that's kind of the main thing that people are looking out for, and it's the main thing that people are asking about the backwards compatibility. You know, obviously, will FSR4 work on RDNA 3? It's a touchy subject. Some people are going to be pissed that it won't, or it might not, because we don't know. I have my feelings on it. Like, realistically, I read a lot of the comments. I see the arguments. I see a lot of people saying they will turn their back on AMD because the reason they've stayed with AMD is because AMD have always looked after their, obviously, older hardware. I think that's a lot to put on AMD, personally. I think if you are someone that's championing for AMD and you want them to do better, you can't expect to hold them back by them always being able, or always being held to give you backwards compatibility. At some point, they have to break off that. They have to move forward. That's my thought on it. Will I be gutted if it doesn't work on the XTX? Yeah. Will I live with it? Absolutely. It is what it is. So I, obviously, like everyone else, we all sat and waited at CES for the launch of RDNA 4, and hey, it just didn't happen, and we've heard a lot since. So obviously these are now due to launch in March. I've heard a few reasons why they're due to launch in March. It doesn't particularly make sense to me. I know people are talking about they wanted to do price adjustments. It doesn't take till March to do price adjustments. NVIDIA have shown us their prices. Nothing's going to change other than, yes, the availability might not be there. This might force the prices up. I mean, maybe if that's what maybe AMD know that they can't come in as low as what they need to do looking at NVIDIA's launch prices. Maybe if NVIDIA's launch prices are nowhere near what they turn out to be to actually be able to buy the damn things, maybe that gives AMD a chance to go a little bit higher with their prices, knowing that the NVIDIAs just aren't going to be anywhere near their obviously their RRP. I'm not saying that's not within the realms of possibility. I personally think, I don't think anyone, certainly from the talking, all the leaks that headed up towards the 50 series, there was no leaks that I knew. I didn't get involved in any conversations or read any conversations of any type of knowing of the multi-frame generation that NVIDIA were about to launch. And I think that AMD were probably at CES, they were ready to obviously at least talk, maybe not price, but at least have some discussion over their GPUs. I've no doubt maybe they expected NVIDIA to be more expensive. I don't think they expected the multi-frame generation. And we don't know if the multi-frame generation is going to be the thing that sells. To me, that's a very make or break. NVIDIA could have a very bad generation with the 50 series if the multi-frame generation isn't very good. No one's going to know that yet. AMD aren't going to know that yet. But I feel a little bit suspicious, and I wouldn't be surprised if AMD have put off until March and they release a kind of multi-frame generation now. Whether it's something that they do through fluid motion frames, obviously there is the lossless scaling app, which that kind of works very similar to fluid motion frames, and that allows for more frames than just your 2x. So whether they do something through the fluid motion frames or whether they do something through FSR3, I don't know. But I have a gut feeling that AMD probably thought, can we do something to challenge this? Because if it works well, and this is the problem, and this is why I say these benchmarks are going to be complicated, because they are not going to tell a full story. For one, to me, the biggest upgrade for the AMD, obviously the highest one at the moment, the 9070 XT. If we look at the supposed benchmarks, they're not that much different from what we've been seeing for quite a long time now. So somewhere between the 7900 XT and the 7900 XTX, which obviously falls into, now there are games that the 7900 XT does beat the 4080 on. So there will be outliers, and that's a reason why I think it's probably more likely to be a little bit closer to the XT performance, but it will have games where it will beat the 4080, and then I believe it's something like the 4070 Ti or Ti Super in ray tracing performance. So they've not beaten anything from last generation, okay? They haven't moved forward in performance. So AMD, they are a visual gain this generation. That is it. So again, benchmarks aren't going to tell the full story. Now, if you're obviously on older hardware, or if you're not on the higher hardware from last generation, so if you're not on the XT or the XTX, price to performance, it's going to be a good card to buy, I think. I think the obviously, if this comes in kind of below 600, it's going to be a lot of performance for that type of price tag. But a lot of this will come down to what it looks like, and a benchmark is not going to tell us that, in the same way that the 50 series is going to be what does it look like and how does the multi-frame generation perform. If the multi-frame generation performs very well, it's going to be hard to see a scenario for the average gamer where the AMD GPU is going to be anywhere near it. Now, obviously, people have spoken to me. I've seen people doing it. You can use, obviously, fluid motion frames. You can stack it with FSR3. So you can get them both to run over the top of each other, and you can get some high performance out of that. I haven't tried it. I hear it. In some games it works quite well. In other games it doesn't work that well. Obviously, we've had the lossless scaling app, which both of these GPU brands can use. So effectively, this will come down to how good it looks. Obviously, ray tracing performance and FSR upscaler for the AMD, all about how well it looks, and then obviously your price to performance, so how much these cost. And then with the NVIDIA GPUs, like I said, it's the multi-frame generation. So our traditional benchmarks are about to go out of the window to me this generation, because the most important information will be how good does it look. And that's going to be really interesting, because you're going to have to start taking people's word for it. And that's a scary situation to be in, because there's some people that I trust, and we heard, I mean, I don't want to throw people under the bus, but obviously DLSS has been the better looking upscale. I don't think anyone wants to really argue that. The performance of DLSS and a visual aspect has been ahead of FSR quite considerably. Now, when FSR3 launched, across the internet it looks as good as DLSS, or some people were saying it looks better than DLSS. And the reality was, after we got a few games and we took a good look at it, it wasn't near. I mean, to be fair, in some games it is near. I tried it in Horizon Forbidden West, it looked pretty good. There wasn't that far off it. You're kind of searching for stuff. But then I've tried it in some of the other newer games, UE5 games, and it doesn't look very good. There are issues that are very noticeable. I'm playing at 4K, and at 4K, you are basically giving the upscaler the absolute ultimate best chance for it to perform. So if at 4K it doesn't perform very well, at 1440p it's getting worse. And then obviously as you go down the stack, it's getting worse. So unfortunately, we are going to be in the realms of taking people's words for it, because even when people are trying to show you stuff over YouTube compression doesn't make it obvious. I know people complain about Digital Foundry and their 50 times zoom or whatever you want to call it. But trust me, there is stuff that I see them zoom in to make a point of that you don't need to be zoomed in to see it. It is there. When you are playing that game with a full screen in front of you, you will see it. They are just zooming in to highlight that issue. You can take my word for it, don't take my word for it, it doesn't matter. But there's not many times where people have mentioned a problem or something doesn't look great that I won't immediately say I completely agree. I've seen exactly the same thing and I understand exactly where they're coming from. So that's kind of it. I mean, now I want to leave this on a little note, and this isn't a dig at AMD, okay? And this isn't a dig at AMD users. And the reason I'm going to say that is because I read this comment, and I read it a lot from NVIDIA users also, because I'm a user of frame generation, I'm a user of upscales, I game at 4K. Without upscalers, I would not be gaming at 4K with a 7900 XTX or a 4080. It's not possible. Using the upscalers gets me there. Now, the argument that I see a lot of the time is I'd rather play it native, so I'd rather play at 1440p native. My argument to that is 4K with an upscaler looks superior to native 1440p. That's my argument. People can take it for whatever it is. Now, in the future, I'm basically due an operation in a week's time. I will be off work for 6 weeks, and my intention is I've dragged out of the loft, so I'm sat here in front of two monitors now. I've dragged out of the loft my 1440p monitor, and my intention is to start running some comparisons. And I'll be running comparisons of 1440p native versus 4K upscaled, and trying to match the performance with the 4K upscaled of the 1440p native to put it out there on YouTube, and you can decide yourselves. Hard for YouTube because visually YouTube kind of screws with stuff, but you can decide yourself if you think that the 1440p native at the same performance as 4K upscaled, which one you think is the superior. And from my personal point of view, the 4K using an upscaler, even if you have to drop a few settings, because 4K medium looks as good as 1440p ultra. A lot of people don't kind of get to grips with this, or not in every time, but you know, I mean, you can change some stuff at 4K because at 4K you do have that better picture quality. So I'll mess around with it, try and match obviously the performance and put some videos out there, because I think a lot of people are very much kind of against upscalers, and I think it's time. I'm not going to tell people how to use their hardware, I'm not going to tell people how to play their games, but I think you're spending, if you're using certainly a NVIDIA GPU, this is my thoughts, if you're using a NVIDIA GPU and you're not using the technology, you're wasting your money. That's my personal point of view. You've got some really good tech. I think you should make the most of it, or at least try it if you're not trying it. That's my advice. And that kind of leads me to a lot of the comments, because a lot of people are so anti frame generation and so anti upscaler. I kind of think, is this the generation where AMD didn't read the room? And what I mean by that is NVIDIA are ahead. NVIDIA are ahead with upscalers, okay? I don't think anyone's going to argue that. And obviously, AMD have held out this long from staying away from an AI upscaler. Should AMD have decided to completely go against the grain, drop upscalers, drop ray tracing, and just go pure raster? And is that doable? And that's the problem. Are we at the point of we are going down this route because raster is becoming unachievable? We're not getting the gains. There is no other option. Because, like I said, this isn't a dig at AMD. This isn't a dig at AMD users. I read as many NVIDIA users that will say they don't care about upscalers and they don't care about ray tracing. Because what I'm thinking of, if AMD come out of FSR4, at whatever point in time FSR4 rivals DLSS, it's as good as DLSS. AMD improve their ray tracing, and at some point they're matching the NVIDIA GPU. What happens when we get a 6070 and a equivalent AMD GPU, and they match each other on raster performance, they match each other on ray tracing performance, and they have an upscaler that matches? We've got two fucking GPUs that are the same, with a different name on them. And I kind of think, what's the point in that? Like, realistically, what do you know what I mean? It's almost like, okay, so we've now they've equaled themselves out. Would it been a better situation for AMD already being behind with RT performance and behind with the AI performance to just say, let's drop it and let's go the pure raster route? Let's let NVIDIA do their AI. Let's let them do their ray tracing. They're ahead on both of those. We're behind on that. But there is a large portion of people that do not care for those features. Should we just go raster and ignore the rest? And I kind of think maybe they should. Let me know in the comments what you think. Because it doesn't appear that they're going to go that route now. I don't think that they're going to push in this generation for an AI upscaler, and they're going to push on ray tracing performance, and then suddenly they're just going to drop back from that. I think that's the route that they're going to go, and we all know NVIDIA are going that route. So I don't know. I know it's awkward because we will always compare, my argument. Okay, my argument, because I use the 4080 and I use the upscalers, is that the thing that lets AMD down is the upscaler performance. So that's been my argument. So I'm pushing AMD to get a better upscaler. But at the same time, I don't need AMD to do that. I can just use the NVIDIA GPU. If I used a NVIDIA GPU and I didn't care about ray tracing and I didn't care about the upscaler performance, maybe AMD pushing for just raster performance would make me in the next generation decide to leave NVIDIA and go to AMD, because they will suddenly be the GPU providing me what I want, and NVIDIA would no longer be the GPU for me. So that's what I'm saying. Would that have been a way? Because, like I said, I read it from the AMD users that they don't care for those things, and that's why they bought the AMD GPU. And I'm not going to argue with them, because I completely understand that. It doesn't matter if it's what I like. If that's what they like, I can completely understand that. So, like I said, I've read it from NVIDIA users saying the same thing. Would AMD have been better off actually moving some of those people away from NVIDIA? Just a thought. Like I said, maybe it's not something that can get done. Maybe raster performance has hit, obviously 5090. I mean, let's be honest, the 5090 is coming in now at 32 gigabytes of VRAM, 600 watts, which is really off-putting for me personally. And how much gains is that going to make in raw gaming performance? I don't think it's going to be massive. £2,000 GPU. I don't think it's going to be massive. And that's obviously based on its raster performance. Were we at a point where this is our option? And like you say, if the GPUs have reached a plateau on how far they can push, and then you've got Samsung and whoever else coming out with 240 hertz 4K monitors, I'm not surprised. Nvidia probably thought, holy shit, yeah, okay, we've got Cyberpunk running with path tracing at 30 FPS. 240 hertz monitor. Yeah, good luck. We're a long way away from that. So I can kind of understand maybe the frame generation will work and it will work well in that situation. So I've rabbited on for way too long. I'm gonna end it there, but let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if you're upgrading. And let me know how you feel about the benchmarking, because as far as it goes, like I said, this could be the generation where benchmarks. I said this last generation, but I think this generation, especially with the multi-frame generation and the way that FSR, because like I said, AMD's biggest thing I think is going to be visual improvements this generation. They're not pushing anything higher in performance. Obviously ray tracing performance they're pushing higher, but in overall performance on a benchmark they're not going to be above, or probably in most cases they're not going to be above, unless it's ray tracing, the XTX. So visual performance is going to be a big thing for AMD. So looking at your typical benchmark online, how's that going to work? And is it time for a change? We still need those benchmarks. They're still helpful, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately we're going to be relying a lot on the opinions of people rather than some data sat in front of us this time round. So how that's going to go, I don't know. But I'm in it for the ride, so let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one.